Hey folks, Sean here, and in this episode I'm going to be diving deeper into the details of the B2B SaaS business model. Now, throughout probably the remainder of the content that I'm going to produce this week, I'm going to go into a bunch of different areas here that I feel are important to address. But if you're in B2B SaaS or thinking about getting into B2B SaaS, this is some key fundamental information and a great place to start. So the simple definition about the business model is essentially it's how a B2B SaaS brings in revenue. That's it in its most simplest form. Now, the other components to it are related to exactly how it does that and the details of such in terms of how it's set up and structured. So I've talked a little bit about the different types of styles or strategies that you might consider in terms of developing your business model. So now, the most common are typically paying a typical subscription fee, and that's usually a flat fee for access to your B2B SaaS or your software over the web, typically via a web browser, because much of the software is web-based. The other options are to pay a per-seat subscription. Now, that means that the more users that have access to your software, the users are paying on a per-user basis. So it's not just a flat fee. For an unlimited number of users, seemingly, you are paying on a per-seat basis, for the most part, is what that's typically referred to. Now, the other options that are common, which I've talked about a little bit already, are the freemium model. Freemium model, and then a potential addition there would be the free trial, which is a slight variation on that. So the freemium model is where, now let's say, like the first option that I mentioned, where you have a subscription fee that you pay for access to the software. Freemium model is where you might have different tiers for access. Now, for the most part, different tiers are typically paid, but paid at different levels, as in you'll pay more to gain access to more features. But in order to, sometimes B2B SaaS founders design their business model to incorporate the freemium model, which means that you typically have a free tier as well. Now, how that works is with the free tier, you get a certain access to capabilities, but it's limited. However, that limited tier is free, and that's the lowest level. So anyone can use your product, but only for a limited period or only in limited capacity, depending on what it is your product does, under the design of the freemium model. So, for example, with my podcast show notes app, I might give a certain amount of transcription or show notes production capability away for free each month. And the reason behind leveraging that strategy is because it's supposed to, in theory, send you like wave after wave of new potential customers. So it has typically been used as a growth strategy. Now, I don't love that for a lot of reasons. I'm going to talk more about that in future episodes as well too, but to me, one of the biggest challenges is, especially in the beginning, if you're giving away a portion of your product for free, it can be difficult to get people to convert to paid if you haven't set those activation points right. And if you don't know what those activation points are in the beginning, and by that what I mean is where people are more likely to jump from one tier to the next or to pay or upgrade, then you could be setting yourself up for trouble down the road where you just wind up with a lot of free users, and more than likely it's not costing you nothing to offer your product to all of those users for free. So that gets expensive as well too. So that's one of the main reasons why I don't love leveraging that particular strategy. So what do we recommend instead if we don't love the freemium model? Or I don't love a free tier to begin with, and especially out of the gate for the reasons that I mentioned. However, a free trial I think oftentimes does make sense, and that's what I offer in my product. You can use the product for free so that you can understand its capabilities to decide whether or not you want to buy it, right? So the free trial I like, the freemium model I don't love. It really depends on the remaining components of your B2B SaaS business model, which I'm going to talk about in greater detail in future episodes. But you need to take a look at what you're working on building and which of these options makes sense, right? Most common, flat pricing per month on a tiered structure potentially, as people request greater capacity or more capable features, and you can charge more for those enhanced features. But that's another thing that can be difficult to test in the beginning. You might have greater context for what people are willing to pay more for beyond just paying it all for access to your product, but you might not especially in the beginning. So that's another reason why I like essentially avoiding the freemium model, especially in the beginning, and considering the free trial instead. Because that will help people get into your product, and then you can measure the first and most important activation point, and that's, can you convert users that are using your product for free to a paid tier? What do those percentages look like? I'm going to dive more into those details as well too. So this is an overview of the B2B SaaS business model, and probably the most important component. And that's how you're going to be generating revenue, because that's what the B2B SaaS business model is all about.